Welcome to Talksicology, brought to you by Recovery Unplugged, the place where we talk about all things substance abuse, recovery, and mental health, with guests offering varying perspectives and viewpoints. Hosts Joseph Gordo and Jason Cabello share about their addiction and recovery and other serious subject matter through lighthearted yet candid conversation.
Chad Cisneros is in the fucking building.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, thank you. Just made a little trip from the studio over here, so not too far.
Yeah, from the far north of Cedar Park.
Yeah, from the far north of Cedar Park, Leander.
Thank you for the journey.
Yeah, man, it's good to be on today.
And Jason, you don't know Chad.
No, it's
Chad-
great. We've met about 3.5 minutes ago.
Chad's my buddy.
Yeah, you've told me quite a bit about him, so I know quite a bit about you.
Well, I'm gonna tell you again.
Okay, go ahead.
We have the same sponsor.
Oh,
Great man.
Yeah,
Jaime.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And we sometimes go camping for these weird, not weird,
sponsor
little
retreats.
January intention setting things. And
You call it weird.
most recently, Jaime and another guy started a new 12-step meeting, and he just sent out one of his texts of like, "Hey guys, like I strongly suggest you come to this."
Is your meeting attendance a little better than Joseph's is?
No.
maybe?
No, we're on the same wavelength.
No, it is online, but post-COVID, there was a period where everything went down.
Yeah.
And I found my way onto online meetings.
Did you?
Yeah, and I found a really good one with a bunch of Origins alumni. That facility, Jaime was on there, but we had cats from all over the United States, and it grew. And I actually quite like that forum. Like a lot of people don't. It was good to get back to the intimacy of in-person meetings. But there is something direct about being able to look in the eyes of every single person.
Yeah.
And having to look direct at the camera, whereas meetings sometimes the way it's structured is some guy will be way on the other side muffled and you can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and looking down and stuff, it's different. I wouldn't say it's better. I would just say it's different. And I found a place.
It's a lifeline for,
for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people that got sober during the pandemic that is actually like their preferred
Way.
meeting style. Yeah.
And a lot of like therapy now is done in that format. So.
I see my therapist online.
See, so I don't know. I know there's a lot of judgment about people in the rooms about being in the rooms, and I get that. Like I just think it's a preference.
Definitely. I mean, that's what Joseph and we talk a lot on here about, like how rigid we once were with our like
Recovery.
Yeah, and like how we just can't be anymore. Because I mean, I've lost too many people.
Yeah.
To like stigmas and things,
ideology.
like that. Yeah,
and
maintenance
dogma.
program.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like whatever keeps you here another day.
Yeah, and also like just being here. If you're in abject suffering, I don't know if that's the goal. I feel like the real goal, if there is one, is to expand one's consciousness so that there's bliss.
Yeah.
And if the rigidity keeps you in a structure that's ultimately sort of the catalyst for suffering, then like you're saying, that rigidity should probably be loosened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I love it. I knew with you, we would just like jump right in and get real deep real quick, but for the benefit of the listener or viewer or however you consume this wonderful podcast, I'd like to unpack just a little bit about who you are, right? So, so you are one half of, do you call yourself EDM? I feel like y'all are more housey.
Yeah, I feel like that name's been completely and totally debaucherized. It used to stand for electronic dance music, just like that. And then it became a subset of a bunch of electronic genres, namely that which is sort of commercial and big room and main stage. And so, yes, the term would apply to the main brand that's Tritonal. It started as an underground progressive trance act in 2007. And by 2012, we were playing globally at all the major festivals in the world, including Lollapalooza and EDC and Ultra. And yeah, you name it. I feel like we've played it even like like God's Kitchen and Creamfields and Stereosonic in Europe.
Wow.
And Russia.
And we've tried a couple times to get you on the show.
Yeah.
And it's been like, man, I'm sorry, I just got back from Budapest last night.
I gotta stay in. Even today I tried to cancel. I was like, I can't. My schedule's insane. Like literally right before I left, the reason I'm late is I was mixing down stems. So yeah, I mean, ultimately we've DJ'd as performers the entirety of our career. So we're DJs. But we've always felt primarily like we were composers and songwriters and producers.
Right.
I mean, ultimately that's how we got our shows. It wasn't through coming up in the ranks of a local environment and like battling or like doing, like if you think about old school turntablists and stuff,
right.
like there's a DJ culture. Like when I was coming up, that was DJ centric in your abilities and your technical capacity to actually DJ.
Yeah.
And I mean, we mix records to transition from one to the next, but primarily we're there to play our songs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that needs to be noted because it's different.
And that's where the stems come in that you're producing.
Yeah,
So
I
you
mean,
produce-
we have another project. There's the Tritonal project, which is our biggest project. And, I love the Tritonal project. But in the pandemic, actually 2 years before the pandemic, we were feeling like that project had gotten to this place where it had, like, we've got gold records with the Chainsmokers and we've got platinum. We got big records out there that have become commercial records.
Yeah.
right.
And when we play when we go on a Tritonal tour or play a show, there's I don't know, it's like going to a Coldplay. You want to hear Yellow.
Yeah.
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 I mean, you might like his new record, you might not, but like let's hear the big one, And I know that as an artist and I know that as a fan. And so there's a certain psychological overlay that's on me. I feel like I need to play these certain tracks in some form, some remix that the fans purchased a ticket, and there's a lot of other things they could have done with their money. And so you kind of start to mentally play to not the lowest common denominator, but you're trying to, you reach a point in your career at the arc where you've written enough of a body of music and you've sort of figured out, yeah, maybe we have more hits, maybe we don't, but there's a lot of records, there's a lot of fruit in the tree that we know our fan base wants to hear.
Right.
And irregardless of how many times I've listened to or played those songs, I feel a pressure to play them again. And the point of what I'm trying to say is we got to a place where we felt not boxed in, but like we wanted another creative outlet. And so
when you're saying tritonal, you know what people expect.
I know what they
Tritonal.
want.
Yeah.
We've had so many tours. We've done all the things. We see how they rage when the hit comes on. Like, so give it to them.
Yeah.
But also as a just a creator, and as somebody who just loves writing new music and sound design and modular synthesis, like there was this itch not being scratched in me as an artist because we had created this well-worn.
And you want to do your new shit that you're
Want
excited
to do your new
about,
shit, and nobody necessarily cares about it, and I don't need them to care about it.
Yeah.
I just want to create unaboundedly.
Yeah.
And so we created this new project called Prana, which prana is this word that came sort of from the Sanskrit text, the Vedas, and it just means life force energy. It's the same word in sort of Eastern cultures like Zen Buddhism that means chi, or in Gnostic mystic circles, Holy Spirit.
That energy, that life force, that
all things have. And so we just double A'd it, Prana. And we decided not to tell anybody it was us, not to tell anybody we were the writers, the producers behind it. And we said, we gave ourselves a target of 3 years. We're not going to tell anybody. And we did it. And it was so humbling and simultaneously rewarding to see how hard it is today, or then in 2019, 2020, to actually make a come up in the electronic dance space without anybody knowing who you are and without shouting from the hilltops that we're actually the guys behind this project.
Right.
that's going to be pretty validating.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty
so
cool.
all we wanted to do was see if we were good enough, just merit alone on the music, to create a little base that was on its own, that had nothing to do with our own prowess from another project. Because we also didn't want it to be, oh, that's their side project.
Yeah.
Maybe it is,
That's
and
their
maybe
weird
it's not.
experimental.
Yeah.
But for us, it was a project, not a side project, a project.
Yeah.
And so we did it, and it was amazing to like do that. And then when we were ready to really announce our first album and do a tour, we obviously knew we were going to have to play shows, and they were going to see who we were.
They're going to figure it out. Unless
Yeah,
you want
so
to
we did
it up with the math.
Yeah, but we've DJ'd primarily, which is a blending of records. For you that don't know what that even means, it just means you beat match to some extent one record and lay it over the top of another and try to keep those two in synchronicity, and then blend the frequencies. Hopefully they're in key or there's some relative harmonic there. If they're not, it's going to sound bad. And sometimes that's all you can do if you want to go to another song, is deal with the dissonance, the dissonance of harmonies. And so, but for this project, Prana, we were like, okay, let's also challenge ourselves to perform pseudo live, in that we should stem out the tracks and be able to isolate those stems on stage. And then we should have a few channels, which are sort of like preset channels, where we can do improvisation over those tracks in real time, so that if we decide to loop a little section and go down to a solo of some atmosphere and
just have some
pad,
drones over here.
we can play some little noodle. We can noodle.
Pull the bass.
We're not amazing musicians, so when we noodle, we've got like the Ableton Push 3. And the main amazing thing about this little thing is you can quantize it to a scale. So literally, there's no bad key you could hit. You might be off time. You can even sort of quantize that with an ARP so that you only land on 16th notes or 8th notes.
But the music theory is built into it.
Music theory's baked in. So we kind of like, it's like going out live with training wheels on. You're live so long as you don't hit solo or mute, those stems are going to run and synchronicity together. And basically what you're doing is you're DJing the bus. From one bus to another. You're blending just like you would before. Except the cool thing is when you know two tracks will ride together for a long time, you can loop those outro parts and literally have them go through the blend of the whole song. So it's basically DJing with more options.
So what was your introduction into this world with mixing?
I was
turntables.
I was a kid on the floors underground.
Where were you a kid?
I was a kid in Amarillo, Texas, and it was a very intense environment for a young addict alcoholic to come up in. There was lots of crystal meth and lots of cocaine. I-40 runs right through that area, and there's a lot of but there's a lot of kids who grew up there who never did crystal meth or crack cocaine. So I had a proclivity and a predilection to change my consciousness, and the reason that I had those is both karmic and programmed, for all kinds of reasons we could get into. But to answer your question, it was my experience with underground dance music when I was 15.
What year were we talking here?
In 1995, in conjunction with psychedelia.
Okay.
So my first time to ingest lysergic diethymaldehyde or LSD was my first rave. And so there was immediately a conflation of the two. And I felt like I had found this state of consciousness, which I didn't have words for at the time, but there was sort of a lifting of the veil. There's a sort of, in terms of psychologically at least, you're witnessing the myriad of complex thought patterns emerge, but you're not necessarily identified with them, so that there's this hovering effect of the mind and its tendencies, and then you as the witness. And I had never experienced that prior to psychedelics.
Right.
I mean, it was as if I came up out of my paradigm and for the first time really got to see, oh, I've just been operating in a model of how I think it all is. It's not actually true. I can plug into, and I begin to test, I can plug into this model. Oh, I could change it a lot. Oh, I could, and you're one step back working with the subconscious a bit. And I didn't have vernacular or anything. It just felt to me like an energetic cleansing.
I was going to ask, like, were you understanding this in real time back then? Or
no,
it's like now?
All it felt like to me was deeper levels of connectivity to the music and the energetic signature of vibration itself. And that I, again, didn't have words for this, but I was feeling the pulsation, the energetic frequency of things just on a more subtle level. And but there was also a lot of like things that were way too intense and sort of volatile. And I think that psychedelics, if they're to be used as medicine, you have to admit that there's a lot of volatility because I was still a 15-year-old young not totally developed, sort of psychologically immature and emotionally immature human being. And because I had the trauma and the pain and the anger and the just the predispositions of what you might refer to as an alcoholic or an addict, that the psychedelic experience, because it was being experienced in a set and setting that was very exogenous, meaning that it was externally focused. The consciousness was on the sensory apparati and then gratifying the sensory
Vicks paper.
Yeah, it was gratifying the senses. So it was the what you hear and what you're feeling and what you're seeing, all of it as a complex. There were moments but there were also moments of sort of like fear and trepidation and confusion, and all of that can happen in simultaneity. It's not either or. And so, but the primary point of all this is music, is that there was a deep rooted, what I would call a samskara or an impression within my mind of the possibilities of coming into higher states of consciousness through moving your body to certain rhythms whilst changing your consciousness state via psychedelics. And that's a powerful combination.
And so as a kid, was it one of those moments where you were like, I want to do this. I want to make music. I will have to be a part of this. Immediately you knew.
No, I knew. And that part of me, I don't believe anything in the external world is random. I subscribe to a model, a fundamental quantum field theory model that's based in quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, that consciousness is primordial and primary, so that all forms and phenomena manifest from the Veda, or the substratum, as quantum physicists would call it, right? The field. And that the field, even in its formlessness, is ultimately latent with the potentiality to manifest intelligently. So that everything, the coalescing and condensing of vibratory forms, even the rock, there's a certain amount, a lattice, a structure through which mathematics and forms and energies and all kinds of complex things had to happen to arrange that phenomena. Just creation itself, even a star, even anything, even gases coalescing, a certain amount of things have to. So what I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to get back to is that personally, when I had that, oh my God, this is home. This is Om. This is my people. This is my sound. This is my tribe. This is my collective. This is it. I have to be a part of this. I look back now and say, of course, you're always going to land there. In another circumstance, it would have happened too. But there was a certain, you could call it your dharma, or you could call it your karma, or you could call it, sort of a predisposition. But I was always going to land myself at the cutting edge of where music and community and elevating ourselves out of the suffering of the ho-hum, the mundane, happened. And if it didn't happen at 15, it was going to happen at 16.
What I love in doing all these interviews that we do, because we get people from all kinds of different stuff, right? Clinicians and different kinds of musicians and whatever, is that almost always someone lands on community at some point. You know, our guest last week, it was the punk rock community.
Yeah,
totally. And that totally. That sense of, if you look at addiction as a disease of disconnection, right? How we all remember the moment when we first felt like a connection. Yeah. And sometimes that's with the drugs or without the drugs,
Yeah, it can be with the drugs initially, and then eventually you've completely and totally bastardized that. Yeah, right.
I worked in the club scene in Miami for quite some time, and you would see the community come together around 3-4 in the morning, and then we were a 24-hour club, so come noon, that community was just a bunch of zombies walking around, and everything was depleted, and
that's because the bliss chemistry that happens when you're taking exogenous molecules into your system, it's counterfeit.
Right.
So that the chemistry, our bio-neurochemistry, we have the biggest pharmaceutical stockpile within us. But ultimately, most of us don't know how to work the vehicle. We don't actually know how to work the spaceship. And everything that we've been taught, not everything, but a lot of the premises that are based on Newtonian physics, which is this idea of superficial materialism, that ultimately the table is hard and this is here, and that we are these material beings, and that you can in order to change the way you feel, you take this thing and put it into this thing. It's the other way around. It's actually realizing who you are fundamentally as consciousness, then as vibration and energy, then as gross material, and working with the consciousness and working with the vibration in order to affect the end game, which is the byproduct of consciousness. So, when we begin to do meditative practices and pranayama and breath work, ultimately we're going back to stage one, which is the aspect of ourselves as pure consciousness. And then when we're able to merge into a plane of existence beyond the mind can rest and settle to its most natural state, which is a de-excitatory state. It's not a void, it's not empty, it's just latent. And in that state, there's a deep release of stress and programs that don't necessarily serve you, and there's just And from that place of neutrality, when you start to build back up the structure again, that, oh yeah, I am actually consciousness and energy, and within that consciousness, I'm free, and I'm eternal, and I'm timeless, and I'm boundless, and I'm home. Then when you come back into these ideas of your localized self, or this individuated portionality of consciousness, you can begin to rip down some of the structures and patterns immediately that don't actually serve you, because just like a psychedelic trip, you just microdosed a little bit of what you are beyond the localized portionality, which the localized portionality is habituated. The mind's natural tendency is to create habits, patterns, addictions. And we can call them addictions or we can call them habits, but ultimately it's the same thing. They're habituated patterns that create all kinds of problems and obstacles and toxicity within our spacesuit. But if you were to look at other people who aren't addicts and alcoholics and also aren't conscious, what you're going to find is a whole another subset of habituated tendencies, proclivities, predilections, and predispositions that have patternized in a way as well that also create suffering, just not in the acute way that has happened
alcohol
with
and
us.
drugs. Yeah.
So when you begin to realize this, it also begins to sort of undermine what we were taught when we first came into the rooms of AA and NA and CA, which is that fundamentally we're different, or that we're set aside from normal people. And that this could be science, it could be genetic, or it could be programmed, or it can be both. We don't really know. And I just see that alcoholics and addicts, in that, yeah, they may be different in that they were willing, they may be more extreme in that they were willing to risk detriment to their physiology by use of changing the way they felt or changing their consciousness, meaning that they're such an intense seeker that they're willing to risk their entire spacesuit, what we would call the mind body, in lieu of an altered state of consciousness or experiencing something different from the ho-hum mundane. Whereas other people just aren't willing to take that risk. They're not as intense in that way.
Well, it's just the methodology used to get by is just much more damaging, to where we're forced into this space where if your unhealthy thing is candy or work or whatever, it's going to get you eventually, but it takes a lot longer than heroin does. You know,
it takes a lot longer. And for that's what I mean about the intensity of the sadhaka, or that means seeker in Sanskrit, or the intensity of the addict and alcoholic is really, really intense on chasing bliss experiences and bliss chemistry. So this is what's beautiful about them. Once they can really begin to tap into disciplines and modalities and methods of healing that are in attunement with their highest frequency, like a laser beam, that intensity can be refocused and redirected. All of a sudden, they're going to blast through and burn through all kinds of stuff that maybe and somebody who's just quote unquote fine won't, at least in this lifetime. I think all people are evolving all the time. I think what we can really choose to do is accelerate that evolution or not.
So tell me how you think repetitive music helps
it creates a, just like, I mean, it's ancient as tribal circles, and who knows how far back sound has been used as a way to vibrationally attune and change one's consciousness state. I would say at least 10,000 years. The oldest scriptures are called the Vedas. And Rig Veda and the Vedic tradition is an oral tradition. So they have all these ways of memorizing mantra And mantra is a word, mantra. Man means mind, and tra means vehicle. So it's a mind vehicle. It's a way for changing the fundamental state of your mind. These are powerful codes. They're technology. But the pundits, it's called Panditji. So they would memorize like ABC, CBA, like that. And then they would go ABCD, BCD, CD, back. And they would do all these sort of memorizing things where these pundits would memorize tens and thousands of mantras. And this is how it was given down, right? When something's written down, it can be burned in a library and gone. But when it's an oral tradition, it seems to survive. So I would say that sound is like embedded within our structure. And I don't know how long it's been being used as a way to change our consciousness, but the hypnotic rhythm of dance music, in that it's, well, at least maybe not commercial dance music, that dance music seems to have more of a song structure. But what you're talking about is like OG techno. Like that's more
acid
tribal,
house kind of stuff,
right? Right, and tech house and things that like really cater to the groove and to the beat, and not so much to the interval progression or the chord progression or song structure.
The drop.
Yeah, they're not these big arranged ideas. They're loops that can endlessly flow, and in that they're hypnotic, and it can act as a drone. It can sort of bring the mind into a state of repetition where, just like driving, when you're driving down an old road, an old curvy road, and you're a good driver and proficient in your driving, the mind can uncouple from the doership of the drive and begin to be lured into this hypnotic winding and curving. And there's a spaciousness that happens in that place. It's called flow state. And in that spaciousness, there's the thoughts that are always there, obviously, but there's not the intense identification with the mind and its contents so up close, like you're hyper zoomed into everything. There seems to be almost like a zooming out, or a little more equanimity between the content and the phenomena of the mind, and then the observer or the witness of that phenomena. And music can do the same thing. And so I've always kind of intuitively known this, but when I started to really practice discipline sadhana, which is just a word that means spiritual discipline, and began to have experience, daily verifiable experience and repeatable experiences of transcendence, then when I would come back out into creation and stuff, I would notice how there were parallels between states that I would get in when I was creating and meditative states. And although they weren't the same, because with meditation, you can achieve what's called pratyahara, so that you're closing down all the gates. You're closing down the eyes and the ears and the nose, or maybe you use binaural beats or whatever, but you're closing down some of the sensory apparatus, and you're using the closing down of that to refocus the headlights of awareness back internally. But I would still reach these very blissful, peaceful states. And then sometimes I'll reach that in making music as well. More so, though, when I'm actually making meditation music, which I do now. There's a project we have. So there's the Tritonal project. There's Prana, which is deep, melodic, underground, progressive house. And then there's Prana Shakti, which is musical medicine. It's binaural beats and it's Pythagorean tuning, which is a way of creating harmonic overtones that lie outside of the chromatic scale or the Western scale of equidistant notes that neatly run up 12 keys within a scale of the piano. We did that because of the invention of the piano, and it works well to sort of tune instruments together, but ultimately it's based on 440 hertz as the fundamental key, and 440 it's not that, well, we could get into cymatics, but there's certain frequencies that create vibrational. So consciousness gives rise to vibration and energy. You could call that Shakti. And then once that's refined one step greater with creative intelligence, it becomes prana. So a prani is somebody who can receive prana. Certain frequencies create these beautiful, geometrically rich, complex shapes. And you can see this now with the science of cymatics. You can see it with sand, and you can see it with water. They can do it with water by quickly freezing the top part of a petri dish while a certain frequency is overlaid, and taking a photograph of that frozen still. And so what you find is that there's certain frequencies that have these beautiful shapes, right? And
so you're talking about, like, I've seen some videos of, like, when they put sand on, like, a subwoofer.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, 45 megahertz does this. And
it does. Yeah. It does. And so when you start to detune the scale with what's called micro-tuning, you don't have to work with A440 anymore. Like, in fact, most synthesizers, especially software synthesizers, can accept and load in what are called tune files, .tun. So say you wanted to have a solfeggio frequency. Maybe it's 432 or maybe it's 512. You could tell I have different websites I go to where I'll plug in a fundamental, which just means the root of your interval scale or your collection of notes, right? I want 432. Say I want that as my root. Be like same thing as A sharp or something, but it's not. It's 432. And then you type in the ratios, which are intervals, 1/4, 1/5, or 2, which would be chords. And you type in, and I want the harmonic overtones of those to land on this key. So you literally pre-program a scale or certain notes within the scale. And then when you play those chords again, it's an entirely different sound. It's nuts. And some things that a normal chord, maybe it's a major fifth or something that you're used to it sounding a certain way and that's good to you, it'll sound differently. And whether that's good or bad has a lot to do with your frequency and your perception of what's good or bad. And it's all relative at that point. But when you sort of create solfeggio frequencies and you couple that with binaural beating, which is the psychoacoustic effect that happens when you separate the right channel and the left channel and sub-frequency. So say, I was working on this today. You could take F or whatever so you know that every frequency, every time it doubles in frequency, it creates a new octave. That's how we create octave. But this thing happens down low where we can hear 60 hertz, but we feel 60 hertz a lot better than we hear it, right? And so, but when you tune one, say, right channel to 64 and the left to 60, you're going to hear this phenomena called binaural beating. And it happens better when it's super stereo, meaning that the right channel is completely isolated from the left.
Right.
And you're going to hear this whoa, whoa. And it's the psychoacoustic effect that you're hearing the frequency or the beating. It could be whoa, 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 whoa. How fast that is the difference of the two frequencies. So it could be a 4 hertz beating. It could be a 16 hertz beating. It could be a 2 hertz. If it's 2 hertz, it's going to be whoa. But if you were to render that out and put that in Ableton Live or Pro Tools or Logic Pro, you're not going to see this big dynamic thing. You're hearing it like that because your ears are trying to figure out, is it 60 or is it 64? And that too acts as this hypnotic subfrequency that throbs in the midst of all these sort of ethereal atmospheric twinklings that are now in these certain frequencies, the solfeggio frequencies that create these amazing shapes, these super symmetrical shapes. And because you're a water being and your cells are full of water, when you're getting hit with this laser beam of sound, you're literally changing, in this moment, the frequency of your structure. So yeah, it's affecting your mind and it's affecting your emotions on whatever way it is, but it's also physically affecting the water in your body.
Well, when you talk about hypnotic, I'm just like listening to you. I'm just like, I feel hypnotized right now with you talking about it because you get so passionate and you move so much when you're talking about it.
Yeah, so I love again, we're back to where we started, which was this young 15-year-old rave kid that like took psychedelics as a way of escapism to just change my reality because for me, it was horrid. And there was a gift inside that. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Probably fortunately, I continued to chase substances of all kinds to death's door to see if there was a way of stabilizing bliss chemistry by using exogenous substances to change my endogenous system. And I've come to the realization, even though I still struggle like we all do with different levels of patternizations within my life today, I've come to the complete realization that I'm not going to get to where I want to go with hardcore narcotics or alcohol or these kinds of things, barbiturates, trying to change the dis-ease internally. But it's the same with music. And it's the same with working out, and it's the same with breath work. You can get
I know people who've gotten addicted to the breath work.
You can get overly addicted to getting high. And we can get high off ice cream, we can get high off, great sex with our wife, we can get high on Chick-fil-A, we can get high on with binaural beating and music, we can get high. We know how to get high. I think everybody knows how to get high. And some people get high on Fox News and the debate, and they get high on social media with arguing, and they get all ramped up, and it's reinforcing their identity of their structure and their opinions and their thought. But they're high. Mm-hmm. And they're lifted, they're raised, it gets them going. They may not be aware of it. But everybody knows how to get high. And I'm starting to come to this place now within my journey where I'm more interested in getting free. Because even with spiritual practices, I find myself getting really high and clinging to my experiences in meditation. I know how to pierce my chakras. I know how to get real out there. And at some point, we've got to turn back and face our lows, which is this, and learn to stay in the middle and really begin to stabilize equanimity and be okay with the ho-hum, knowing that your bliss and inner contentedness, it's not object-associated awareness where you're always looking for phenomena to be in a certain way, pattern, or sequence in order for you to feel okay, but that your okayness actually comes from what and who you are beyond phenomena. And that even the mind from that perspective is the seen, it's not the seer. So that normally we buy into this illusion that we're the witness, but that witness is localized within your mind body. And that because your mind is self-aware, that it's the awareness that's aware of phenomena. But actually, the mind is a crystal which is being lit by consciousness. And much like a crystal, if you were to take a diamond and put a red rose in front of it, because the light is penetrating that crystal and refracting and reflecting off of that red rose, the crystal would go pure red. And so you would say that the mind is red, but the mind isn't red. The mind is a crystal in a mirror that can reflect back to you phenomenology and phenomena and your state of conscious awareness. So that when we begin to awaken to the truth of our beingness, ultimately it's not attaining anything new at all. It's literally just removing ignorance of that which we're not and resting back a level on that which we are as the baseline. And so relative reality is relative reality. It's as much a part of God as anything else. It's not that we deny phenomena or illusion or that which I would call relative truth, which relative truth is that which is always changing. So it's true right now, but in an hour, I definitely won't be in front of this mic. Probably. Unless you let me keep going. But it's true right now that I'm here and the weather's a certain way and the phenomena, it's true. There's relative truth. And if you really stop to think about it, everything in the phenomenal universe is relatively true. Nothing is absolutely true. And so what helps is when we can touch changelessness. And that which is absolutely true by definition doesn't change. And the only thing that doesn't change is the one pure, indivisible, whole, eternal, boundless consciousness field from which all change emerges. And so that when you become that one changeless, pure consciousness field, even if it's for 2 seconds, there's There is a release. There's a for me, the biggest thing that's been happening is the release of the fear of death. Like, and if you were told me, well, you got 5 seconds, I'm going to put a bullet in your head, there would be some apprehension to taking a bullet, but I didn't realize how I used to live so bound by the fear of annihilation and my finiteness, and how it was actually affecting and infiltrating and sort of creating disease state in all sorts of ways of my thinking, into this fear frequency that we've only got so much time and we've got to get it all done. And if I don't get it all done, I'm not worth anything. And my worth is sort of intrinsically conflated and equalized to my doership. And because I only have so much time, I can only do so many things. Because I only do so many things, it's this time, and it's this underlying fear frequency.
That's how I feel all the time.
That's finite. Yeah. So the way to get rid of that is to begin to transcend every morning and every night for 20 minutes. And you won't transcend the whole time, but if you transcend for 20 seconds, and all of a sudden, and then it'll loop back into the mind net and the mind game. But what happens as you begin to, what they call rest between the thoughts, or the gap starts to do this. And all of a sudden, I find myself now in the waking state, like being able to rest in the gaps. And so as we expand the gaps, we're expanding this place of no mind, where the mind can be used upon instruction. Map me here, think about this, work out this problem, and then command the mind to come back in on itself. Whereas right now, because the mind unconsciously believes that it's the seer, it's the doer, and it's got to figure it all out, it's habituated into speculation. So because we identify with the mind as the root of what we are, we're constantly speculating on probable outcomes and futures in order to try to arrange phenomena in a certain way so that we can find inner contentedness, joy, peace, and happiness out here. That's externally focused, object-oriented consciousness. And some of that needs to happen. I need to be able to drive home in a minute. I need to be able to use my maps. I need to be able to use the intellect, what the Sanskrit would call your buddhi. But I don't always need to look at life as a problem that needs to be somehow figured out. And when we become habituated into speculation, we treat everything as a problem that needs to be figured out, including life. Life's not a problem, it's a happening. And it's on purpose and on time and lawful, and things are unfolding just as they should be. And that's really hard to say that when something's chaotic or traumatic or distorted. But with time and zooming out, you can see how it was timely and organized. And so, ultimately, I'm grateful for drugs and alcohol because they forced my cards on, you're either going to begin to take authority and regain your ability to consciously choose with volition your actions through discipline. And so I got real rigid. And I think the rigidity that we were talking about early on is hyper necessary when you have no discipline and structure. Mm-hmm. When you're on Runberg and you're willing to kick in somebody's fucking glass building to take their inventory or whatever, or you're willing to rob somebody, you're willing to hurt somebody, you're willing to steal from others. Those kind of states of consciousness are harmful to society, and they need to be locked down. And that's the kind of addict and alcoholic that I was, because I was so habituated in object focus. I was looking for out there to solve in here. And because when you start to use that rigidity as scaffolding to pull yourself back into a place of centeredness, that scaffolding can be very helpful. Nightly reviews and checking in with your sponsor and sponsoring others and doing service work. These are things which will help you stay within the structure. But at some point, as you expand your consciousness, you begin to see that structure too is one of many structures that could be used in order to get yourself attuned to the highest possible frequency available to you. And so at some point, I started to loosen that structure and even let go of it and stick my toe outside of the boundaries to see, what's it like to take CBD? Or 16 years sober, I decided to do a hero's dose of psychedelics. And with the knowledge of Jaime and who didn't love the idea, by the way, and my parents and my wife and the spiritual pillars in my life, I said, I'm meditating almost 3 hours a day. I'm reading the Yoga Sutras. I'm been initiated into various lineages, and Ram Dass is one of my teachers. And I want to now, 16 years removed from a crack cocaine pipe and alcohol, I want to take 7 grams of psilocybin cubensis at 6:30 in the morning after fasting.
That's a lot of psilocybin.
And I did it. And I don't have any desire to do it again, because when I went in, ultimately I was looking to accelerate and control the enlightenment process. See, the thing about it is when you really buy into the idea of enlightenment as a possibility, it's amazing. But you get hooked, just like you get hooked on any other addiction, on this idea that you, the individual, are going to somehow do enough to become enlightened. And the funny thing about enlightenment is it's not for the little you, it's from the idea that you're a little you. So the little you has to actually die along the way. And it kind of hates it the whole way through, but it wants it, but it doesn't. And it's this, I want to, but I also want to hang on to the And so it's crazy. And what I wanted out of that psychedelic experience was to shortcut or accelerate or fast track or get some download or some bit of knowledge that I could take and be like, see, now I've got the math problem figured it out. Now I can. And I
went in, I brought it back.
I brought it back. And when you're in, you do have it. But the crazy thing about psychedelics is that most of those realizations is because vibrationally you're in a totally different consciousness state, and that place, it's available to you. But as the mind starts to recalibrate itself, and as you come down from the external, you haven't stabilized that frequency in your life. So it's not available to you. It hasn't become an intricate part of your well-worn network of mind. And so we can break through some traumas, and we can have release from PTSD, and there's some amazing things that we can experience in psychedelia. And I'm all for it if you're doing it with the intentionality of healing.
Same.
But I would also warn and guard against looking at those experiences, because they're transient and they're temporal, as ultimate solutions. I feel ultimate solutions. My biggest lesson in that trip was do your work. You can't fast track. Well, the first realization was that there
is a little too much.
It must be that there is that everything is love, and that everything is light, and that I'm a child of the king, a king or queen, whatever, masculine, feminine, divine, feminine, whatever. And that this knowingness that I was okay and perfect, and all the shit that I thought needed to be changed, fixed, or whatever right now was actually a part of the whole working of the curriculum, the fundamental curriculum of an incarnation. And I needed to take the curriculum, and that the curriculum happened in stages and it happened in steps, and that those stages were appropriate. And I didn't need to try to solve the calculus problem with my intellect. And somehow then it's not that. See, resting in beingness has nothing to do with thinking your way through or to a state of enlightenment, a state of luminosity, a state of clarity. It's actually releasing yourself from the grips and bondages of the constantly habituated speculating mind, and resting in your most natural state of awareness, which doesn't have to figure anything out. And in fact, it's already all figured out already. Yeah. And there's nothing to do. And that's the fucked up part about this when it comes to westernized civilization, is that we've been programmed with competitiveness conflated with what I call capitalistic churchianity, which is this idea that we've got a one life shot to get yours, and you better get yours because we have a limited amount of resources, and it's us against them. So you choose your team, you choose your school, you choose your business, but ultimately that competition breeds productivity. And I feel like it's the best model we have with our collective consciousness right now, but I feel highly evolved beings would have evolved highly evolved systems, which allows for free enterprise and free choice, that are always looking for the betterment of the whole, not the individual. And so because we're so programmed to get ours, you can only get one shot, you not miss your chance to blow, because all this kind of like stuff is a paradigm which is corrupt. The foundation is corrupt. It's shaky at best. And I became willing within my sobriety to take all my models of who I was, who I am, and what I think I am, and just start lighting the whole thing on fire. And I knew intuitively that ultimately whatever lasted the burn, whatever was still there would be real. And anything that wasn't was just a fabrication. It was one of those models that we were talking about in my psychedelic trip. And so I've been lighting matches to all my models. And sure, I still come back in and cling to, no. But ultimately, that's what it takes. It's releasing that which you think to be true when it's not, and coming into what's real, which happens in your most natural state of awareness.
Well, what's wild is as you're talking, like you're giving these really detailed explanations of some like super simple concepts that are communicated very differently in like the AA vernacular, right? Like you talk about like shutting down the mind. It's like, oh, people talk about like the monkey mind.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the committee in the head, right? Yeah, or you hear, recently I've been hearing the term burn the ships a lot, you know, like the Vikings back in the days when they were going to take over some, you burn your ship when you land, so then there's no retreat, right? Like where you're moving forward and you don't have an option.
Oh, I like that.
You know, all these different kind of
like that.
AA things, right? You know, the idea of service.
I like
right?
that. As I began to learn a different vernacular and different linguistic, your ego gets behind your spirituality too. So that like the first thing that happens when you really want to awaken is that your ego goes behind the back and decide, okay, now we're a little yogi. And so it'll rob anything. It doesn't matter what it is. But I used to like go into A rooms and like, especially when I was, and get kind of like turned off with some of the, like you're talking about the old adages. Yeah. But there's a real comfortable, warm, deep way of communicating with others who may not understand complex theories and stuff that needs to be embraced. And actually what I feel is that the more free I get, the more simple everything gets actually. And so we can use complex words and stuff in order to explain things, but ultimately it comes down to, you know, do you feel love in your heart? And do you feel happiness in your body? And do you feel inspired to create? Do you want to help other people? Like, are you filled up? And that's ultimately all it is. But because we've created such complex structure and complex habits and complex ideas about who we are and complex techniques are sometimes needed to sort of unwind some of those things and come back. But you're not creating more complexity. You're unwinding complexity to come back down into simplicity.
I like that. I like that one. I got to say, this is probably the episode that you and I have had to talk the least, Jason, which I love it. I knew it was going to be wild. Just to kind of tie some things together for our viewers and our listeners, right? Some of the you just jumped right in. I'd like to hit some of the more basic points.
Sure,
before we run out of time here, right? So, we always ask, like, at what point in your journey in the substances, did you realize that something had to change?
Oh man, probably early. I mean, I started drinking when I was 13, 14. I was snorting coke at 15. I mean, I landed in county jail literally on my 17th birthday. The DA waited because I had forged some checks. I was on meth and I was on cocaine. And
so they waited till your birthday?
Yeah, because they wanted to charge me as an adult, which was probably really good for me.
That's a very Texas.
So I started to be sent to, mandated inpatient, outpatient programs and meetings and getting my card signed and all these kinds of things early. And so I had an inkling early that there was a problem. But I was always an honor student and went to they would send me off to the gifted schools and I didn't have to study. And I was just intellectually, I felt like I could just ride the system. I didn't have to try. I was one of those kids who I just got it mostly. And so I felt like I was different. I felt like I was set apart. And I bought into the lie when I went into these rooms that I was somehow different than all these people, that because they had gotten God, that was their problem. You know what? When I really knew I was done was at 25 when I surrendered. Because when you know, and you're not even having fun. Like there's not any, it becomes a death. Like it's not, we stopped partying way long ago. You know, I wasn't smoking weed at 7:30 on my way to engineering calculus at UT and shooting cocaine in the library because I was partying too much.
Yeah.
I wasn't partying too damn much. That was my medicine. I was just becoming okay internally so that I could actually deal with responsibility. But man, my addiction was so heavy that it went into these dark places that few come out of. And so at 25, I was done, and I became willing to do anything. I mean, if you would have told me if you eat, you know, these rocks, they'll do it.
Yeah.
I ate some rocks before.
Yeah,
you ate rocks before?
I ate some rocks. But or dirt or whatever, or you know, this. And that willingness was everything, right? Yeah. That willingness allowed me to go and make the hard amends that I needed to make to pay people back, and to go to business owners and sit down with them and say, I was the person who took these things, and I want to create a payment plan to pay them back. And some of those things were really scary because they could and probably should have landed me in jail.
Yeah.
But I went and made those amends via my sponsor's advice because I wanted to clear the wreckage of my past, and because I wanted to live differently.
That's a big step, because a lot of those people will do the indirect amends when it comes to things like that.
Stuff,
Jaime wasn't having indirect.
You really?
No, he wanted direct. He wanted direct on especially the hardest ones that I felt like were a state penitentiary kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know,
and the book gives you an out. The big book.
Yeah, if you're going to hurt yourself,
it's like, if it's going to cause you harm,
I even
you don't
tried
have
the
to
out.
do it. Yeah.
I tried the out with Jaime. I told Jaime, like, I'm engaged. If I go and I, wrap myself out on this one, there's a high likelihood I'm going to be sent away. That's going to harm Carol, and it's going to harm our relationship. And he was just like, any links? How free do you want to be? I mean, he left it to me.
Yeah.
He left it to me, but you're like, oh my God, I got to do it all. I got to do it all. And I sort of started to do it all. And that rigidity created a lot of fire. And within that fire, I helped a lot of other people, especially early on, get sober.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. And I'm doing that today just in a different way. I was out at Legacy with Nick just a few days ago, and there was probably 20, 25 men who were in an inpatient setting. And I spoke for about 45 minutes, an hour, and then we did another hour of full-on Kundalini Kriya breath work and meditation. And I've done that at Infant Recovery and their IOP out there. They bought what used to be Austin Recovery, and I did it with those men. And I'm doing less sponsoring of the steps these days. I still believe that they're amazing and should be worked and could offer real benefit to people who have no structure and or who are in abject alcoholism and addiction. But I also believe that meditation is this amazing secret, as we were talking about in the meeting a couple weeks ago, that has the potential to unlock greater levels of awareness of our constitution, our what we really are beyond our thoughts, that can do not different, but another level of healing, that there's another level of unlocking the psyche and really freeing up the energetic resources that are constantly used in this sort of agitated speculation. It's a lot of energy. Thinking produces a lot of energy. We think 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And we know that they're energetic because we can measure their vibrational frequency with an EEG, an electroencephalogram. Right. And so because thoughts are energy, and we can measure those thoughts electronically, then we know that certain thoughts have certain energetic signatures. And so what's amazing is with the scientific research now, with the diodes and all the things that they're able to do, is to watch what happens as one begins to ascend into theta and gamma brainwave states, what that does to the parasympathetic nervous system, and what it does to the breath, and how those three things affect your entire system, from inflammation of the cells to the anandamides that are being produced from your pineal gland. And I mean, your whole body's this biochemistry makeup, and it's a printout of your state of consciousness. So when you change your state of consciousness in real time, you're able to change the way you feel. And the way you feel affects your thoughts, and your thoughts affect your actions. And ultimately, the way you feel and the way you think and the way you behave creates your personality, and your personality creates your personal life. So if we want to redo our personal life, it's best if we go back to the base and rework ground up. Yes, we can make amends, and yes, we can go sit in meetings, and yes, we can make coffee. But if the underlying root dis-ease is that I am this little individual who's just going to live and die, and it's us versus them, and I got to get what I can while I can get it, and the world's a shitty place, even if you're sober, it kind of sucks.
Yeah. I started practicing TM in 2021.
There you go.
And I'd say it's as vital to myself as my initial like working of the steps was. Completely different vehicle. Yeah. For myself to do it, because I mean, if I miss it, like I know, just like I feel it, like if I miss it. And sometimes, like you were saying earlier, for the 20 minutes a day, maybe 1 minute or something, like I'll get there.
There's a thing,
but
there's a transcending, but it's what you,
and it's worth it.
It's worth the whole
and it really is. It's like, and it's not even every time. It's like sometimes,
but a lot of that, sometimes you feel yucky is de-stressing.
Yeah.
And there's a nervous system letting go of stuff that as it lets go, it kind of comes up to the surface and waves goodbye. And that can be uncomfortable sometimes, but just know that every time that happens, that you're letting go of something that you don't need to hold on to anymore, and that you're that much freer. And I love the TM institution. One of my teachers is Tom Knowles, and Tom, at 16 years old, left the United States and lived with a yogi named Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was the founder of the Transcendental Meditation movement. And Tom ran and was a big part of the TM movement for a long, long time, and now teaches a form of meditation called Vedic meditation. And there's a podcast called The Vedic Worldview you should check out if you haven't. And Tom's he's a scientist. He's a quantum physicist and really pragmatic and logical in his approach to the intersection between, the physical universe and spirituality. And I love how he ties scientific research together with scriptures that are thousands of years old, and shows how at the cutting edge of quantum mechanics and quantum field theory that they're having an absolutely revolution in what is reality. Because ultimately now we've got the technology to go down beyond the subatomic particle. We can fire subatomic particles together in these things called these accelerators, these subatomic particle accelerators, and when they blow them up, they find
the colliders, the tetrahedron colliders.
So what it shows when they break these things up into little leptoquarks and quarks is that quarks are little funny things because they're not things. They're little oscillations of light and energy, and they appear here and then they're not, and they can be in multiple places at the same time. And with the double slit experiment, it shows that ultimately they only appear when consciousness is projected onto them, which is what I was saying at the beginning. That consciousness is primary. So now scientifically, when science begins to take and really approach from a methodological perspective this idea that consciousness is primordial and test it with rigor, we will accelerate more in 10 years than we have in the last 100.
Oh man, let's do it.
I just feel like I have to go sit in my car and just like question my life. Like, am I really in this car right now?
I can't wait to get the audio back on this. Yeah. Listen to it at quarter speed with a dictionary. I'm going to get so much out of it.
We are getting towards the end of our time.
Okay.
So I gotta emphasize here.
Yeah.
Chad, I love you, but it's rapid fire.
Okay, rapid fire.
It's rapid fire question time.
Quick questions, quick answers.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Ben and Jerry's comes to you, and they say, Chad, we want to make an signature ice cream based on you. What do you want to put in the ice cream, and what do you call it?
Okay, there's got to be chunks. I need pecan. I need some kind of a salt. I need caramel. I need vanilla. I need maybe it's a different kind of cookie dough that goes with those, but like some kind of, not Oreo. I just need some raw dough. So just dough with no chocolate. So dough with
Like
no chocolate, caramel. Yeah, sugar cookie dough, caramel, salt, pecan, and some kind of like little like butternut or like a little like toffee thing that gives it a little chew.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of chew. And let's just keep it that simple.
Okay. And what do we call it?
And there's got to be a little coffee in there. So we're gonna call it the Brahma Loca,
which means
so a loca is a plane or a substratum, and Brahma is that plane or that infinite awareness of totalityness. So that when you taste this ice cream, when it lights up that neurochemistry within you, boom, you're the entire universe.
That's the shortcut now.
And how many hertz does that ice cream operate on?
It's on a different spectrum. It's in a whole different. You can't measure it on one.
All right, you go.
I don't know if I'm ready for this answer, but have you ever had a supernatural experience?
Dude, I had one this morning. I have them every day now, and I'm not even joking. Almost every day now. For any of those listening, we talked about TM. I know it's rapid fire, so I'll keep it short. I'm a Kriyavan and a practitioner of Kriya Yoga Pranayama through the lineage of the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yoganandaji. And I have learned ways of penetrating the energetic centers within my nervous system, holding the energy here at the crown at the Sahasrara and focusing it single-pointedly there. And when I do that, I'll merge into a state of bliss and peace, which we would call Prakasha, which means I am light. There is a luminosity. There's a pulsation of consciousness. When consciousness begins to pulsate, it's called the spanda. So it's no longer in its unmanifest latent state, but it's vibrating with pure cosmic energy. And so I would say to anybody who practices a form of bija mantra meditation, like you with TM, with a bija mantra, a sound meditation, that you should consider incorporating breath techniques or breath practices before you tap into your mantra, because it'll accelerate the ability for you to stay single-pointed and concentrate, but it'll also biochemically prepare the nervous system for transcendence. So that was my rapid fire.
For the rest of your life, tacos or pizza?
Can you change what's in them?
Yes.
Oh.
All the pizza toppings are available to you. All the taco.
Everything.
I never knew that was part of this question.
Can you change the shell?
Yeah.
Can it be a chocolate?
And go soft,
flour,
and you
corn.
can switch that up all the time.
Yeah.
Can you change the dough of the pizza?
Yes, you can do it.
Can
New
it be
York, Detroit, Chicago?
What?
Yeah.
We've unlocked new levels of consciousness here.
Man, I'm gonna go with tacos.
That's the right answer.
That is the right answer. All right, so what's the secret?
Fuck.
Remembrance of what you are.
That was a rapid fire.
That was a good one.
Amazing
That was
answer.
a good one.
I love it.
Last one's got to be a music question. So you're having a rough day, you're stressed, whatever it is, right? You're driving home. What do you throw on your car stereo to get yourself back into the right state?
Drones. So I stopped listening as music as entertainment. I still do sometimes, but primarily about, 7 or 8 years ago on airplanes. And it's my last one, so I'm going to take my time with this. But I would call it airplane food. And that because I'm a consumer of music for a radio show that goes to thousands of people, and I DJ as a job, and I make music both as a love and as a career, I'm constantly consuming formulaic, even if it's techno, it's still, there's a structure.
Yeah, there's some rules.
And I began to call, it started with just piano compositions that were more like ostinatos and arpeggiators that would kind of arp endlessly. And then it went to sort of like ambient pads and sort of meditative music. But now I listen to endless drone playlists tuned to certain frequencies, because I'm not listening in order to excite my mind or to try to give me a story or to create more speculation. I'm actually, now that I have my meditation practice stabilized, I'm trying to export meditative absorptiveness, which is dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. These are the 3 last stages of the Yoga Sutra, of the Ashtanga Yoga, 8 parts of yoga. And that 3-part process is called samyama. When you begin to stabilize samyama inside your meditation practice, then it's time for you as a sadhaka to take that experience and export it into the real world. So that now that you're in the real world and there's challenge and there's traffic and there's the wife and there's the quote unquote problems, but problems aren't problems. They're a consciousness.
I thought you were going to say quote unquote kids.
The kids. So
kids.
I put on drones because I meditate with drones and binaural frequencies. And I'm creating grooves in your mind. When you're meditating, yes, we're trying to transcend thoughts by using the mantra to stay single pointed. But actually what we're doing is we're creating another type of thought. It's called a nirodha samskara. You're impressioning upon the mind and teaching it how to stay put, to stay still. And so every time that you enter a state of samyama, you're strengthening your mind's ability just to be. And you wouldn't think that that would be a skill, and it's not. It's its most innate natural state that has been lost due to programming of the collective over multiple generations and incarnations at going outward and looking outward in order to experience what we are. And so drones, by listening to them on the way home, if you want some good playlists, I have them, especially ones that you'll find some drone playlists that are kind of dark and sound like they're more like cinematic things.
Game of Thrones shit.
Yeah. We need things that are just tuning forks. So yeah, I don't listen now for like entertainment to music much.
Wow. Okay. Well, the last thing,
not Freebird.
Not Freebird. No. So the last thing we do is we give the guests the floor.
Yeah.
To anything you want to plug, you want to promote, socials, whatever, a message you want to leave to the guests. It's your time to do whatever you want with it.
Sure. So if you're in a place where you'd like to try to use some type of music and practice some type of meditation, check out Prana Shakti, Praana, and Shakti is Shakti on Spotify. We also have an electronic dance music project called Prana, Praana, that's deep and melodic and rich and beautiful and really chill. And if you're wanting to go full tilt and light it up and turn up the energy and get the house party started, which is fun too. We do that with our kids. The Tritonal music is a great play. It's Tritonal, and we make fully exuberant, let it all out main stage music, and that's the kind of work, record that sometimes is appropriate. So to me it's not about like either or choosing a lane or anything. I think that certain vibrations are suitable for certain experiences and moments, and certain ones aren't. But by incorporating some more meditative sort of things within your waking state, it can help to de-agitate and de-stress maybe the constant story that's going on as you drive home.
Right on. Right. Well, Chad, thank you for your time. I'm glad we finally made it happen after
apologies for my delay. Apologies for my delinquency.
Well, it's going to be on demand now, so they can just get it whenever
so
they're
want. They're not delayed or
it's
delinquent.
on time. Yeah.
So I was delayed and delinquent to this meeting today.
But thank you for your time. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners and guests out there in Talksy land. Listeners and guests. Listeners and viewers out there in Talksy land.
And guests.
Yeah. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe. Go follow all of Chad's different projects on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you consume music. Wherever you consume. And as we like to say here on Talksicology, there's 1,000 ways in. There's 1,000 ways out. And we hope you
find your modular synth.